Whatever the media may say, whatever Hamas may be saying to the Gazan civilians, the Israel Defense Forces is moving forward in order to take apart the last stronghold, namely inside Gaza City. And for that reason, the civilians should leave. It's the typical bluster of Hamas. It's the typical bluster of jihadists. It needs to be ignored, and we need to press on unless Hamas accedes to the very clear two demands. The Prime Minister is right when he talks about Israel becoming militarily independent, when he talks about Israel gaining independence in terms of weapon manufacture and production. All of that's positive. That's very, very distinct from the idea of becoming isolated. It sent a very, very clear, strong, and discombobulating message to the leaders of Hamas that they are not safe anywhere. Hi, everyone. Before we get into today's briefing, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in. And if you enjoy this video, please give it a like and make sure that you check out the MirYam Institute YouTube channel, where you'll find much more analysis, all of our podcasts, and a great deal of unique footage. If you want to see our very latest content, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and you'll get notified as soon as our next briefing is published. And we want to know what you think and the questions that you want answered. So please let us know about all of those in the comments below. And now it's on with the briefing. As you may be aware, the military operation inside Gaza City has begun, and it's begun with an incursion into the city, or rather a surrounding of Gaza City by two divisions. Those divisions are hard at work right now, and they're working in coordination, obviously, with the Israeli Air Force, which is bombarding Gaza City targets from the sky. Now, that aerial bombardment is crucial because it serves basically two purposes. The first purpose is to continue to take out Hamas strongholds, Hamas command and control structures. That's why you're seeing the demolition and the destruction of, for example, high-rise buildings inside the city. That's necessary, obviously, in order to give the IDF the military advantage that it requires and understandably seeks. The other thing that is being achieved, and it is being achieved by way of that bombardment, is the relaying, transmission and receipt of a very clear message to the Gazans who are still there inside Gaza City, namely the Israel Defense Forces intends to operate here. This operation is going ahead. Whatever the media may say, whatever Hamas may be saying to the Gazan civilians, the Israel Defense Forces is moving forward in order to take apart the last stronghold, namely inside Gaza City. And for that reason, the civilians should leave. Now, it's estimated that there are close to 1 million civilians who were inside Gaza City. Out of that 1 million civilians, approximately 350,000 are thought to have fled in accordance with the warnings of the Israel Defense Forces. And I want all of you to understand something. The Israel Defense Forces and successive governments of the State of Israel have repeatedly applied partial measures to the threat emanating from the Gaza Strip since we disengaged from there in 2005, where we withdrew all of the military presence and all of the civilian presence from the enclave. In 2008 to 2009, there was Operation Cast Lead. That was led by Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Chief of Staff at the time, Gabi Ashkenazi. In 2012, there was Operation Pillar of Defense. In 2014, there was Operation Protective Edge. And there were successive additional operations to try and combat the terror threat emanating from Gaza. What all of you need to understand is that all of those partial operations, those incomplete operations, have resulted in the total disaster that was October the 7th. And the total disaster that was October the 7th needs to be responded to with the total defeat of this enemy, because all of the prior wars, all of the previous operations, Cast Lead, Pillar of Defense, Protective Edge, and so on and so forth, have proven to us that nothing other than the complete dismantling of Hamas will bring about the total quiet that Israel's citizens are more than entitled to enjoy. So that is why the IDF is moving forward there inside Gaza City. And I believe that we will be successful. I think that we've heard all of this rhetoric about how we're going to be defeated and how we're going to be overcome and how we're going to be resisted throughout this war and prior to this war. It's the typical bluster of Hamas. It's the typical bluster of jihadists. It needs to be ignored, and we need to press on unless Hamas accedes to the very clear two demands. Unless Hamas accedes to the very clear two demands, namely that they lay down their arms and surrender, and they return all of our hostages, those who are alive and those who are not. I think that people need to recognize that the threat by Hamas to use Israel's hostages as human shields is, of course, firstly indicative of the depravity of this terror organization and underscores the importance of why we have to wipe this terror organization away from the face of the earth. I'm speaking specifically about Hamas when I say that. In addition to that, however, obviously the hearts of every Israeli soldier, every minister, every politician, every member of the Israeli public, our hearts are heavy with concern for the safety of all of our hostages. That has been the case before we decided that we were going to go into Gaza City, and it will be the case throughout this operation in that very same area. What people need to keep in mind is that the Israel Defense Forces has to this point operated by and large with great intensity in areas where we know that the hostages are not located, and with limited intensity in areas where we know the hostages are located. Now that has been carried out on a rather macro scale prior to this current operation throughout the Gaza Strip is now going to be distilled down to a micro scale. So there are various areas that have been ring-fenced by the IDF in order to ensure that we do not operate there in the event that we think that hostages are located. That's the first thing. And the second thing that people should keep in mind is that there are rules of engagement, actually, about how the Israel Defense Forces should respond up to and including if it encounters terrorists inside Gaza City in the event that it believes that engaging with those terrorists will have an impact on the lives and safety of our hostages. So it's a very important topic. It's heavy on the hearts of all of us, and it's high on the list of priorities of the Chief of Staff, senior command, and every single soldier, namely keep the hostages safe, but take out this enemy known as Hamas. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's upcoming visit with President Donald Trump, that the Prime Minister actually announced during a press briefing to the Israeli media yesterday, I think that is very important, and I think that there is a set of clear priorities that need to be followed through with, and I'm sure that the Prime Minister will do that. The first that I believe he has to pursue is absolute continuing guarantees that the State of Israel will not find itself isolated internationally as a result of the ongoing war inside the Gaza Strip. So that's the first thing. Now, the Prime Minister actually made a very controversial speech in Israel where he expressed that Israel will have to become what he defined as and described as a super Sparta, essentially a nation that dwells alone. And since that speech, which caused alarm throughout Israel because Israelis don't want to be an isolated people, he sought to correct some of his comments. So just so that you all understand, it's very clear when you look at the fact that even the United States of America, under the leadership of then President Joe Biden, decided that it wasn't going to ship certain munitions to Israel that we needed in order to prosecute this very just war. And when you look at the fact that the German Chancellor has expressed that he is going to withhold the sale of munitions to Israel, and when you look at the fact that the British government has said the same, and Israel is facing this cascade of an unwillingness of other countries to support as we fight this war against these barbarians, Hamas, inside the Gaza Strip, when you look at that, you recognize that military independence is very, very important for Israel. Israel cannot rely on the word or even the contracts of its so-called allies overseas if those allies feel that they have to placate their domestic constituency, their domestic voter blocs. So the Prime Minister is right when he talks about Israel becoming militarily independent, when he talks about Israel gaining independence in terms of weapon manufacture and production. All of that's positive. But that's very, very distinct from the idea of becoming isolated. Israel should not and must not become isolated among the international stage, astride the international stage. And I think that he will be pressing that with President Donald Trump during the meeting. I also think that they will be working towards an end date to this war. One can debate whether or not that's sensible. I always think it's very problematic to telegraph when you intend to end a war to the enemy. We saw, for example, the folly of that when President Obama did so in the case of Iraq and of Afghanistan. I think that it gives the enemy the hope that they're going to survive this war. And if they just hang on long enough, they'll live to fight and to assail us another day. But I think that will be part of the discussion that's at play. And I also have to tell you that Prime Minister Netanyahu, being the skilled, masterful politician that he is, for better or worse, will be eyeing the next round of elections inside the state of Israel. And in previous campaigns, Prime Minister Netanyahu has campaigned under the banner of Liga Acheret, a different league. And when he says that he is of a different league to his opponents politically, what he's referring to most profoundly is his astute behavior, his astute achievements on the world stage, particularly with the United States of America. And so a photo opportunity with the president following what will be, I expect, a very fiery speech at the UN General Assembly. That will go a great way towards fueling the upcoming re-election campaign of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I believe that all of those things will be being discussed. On top of those, you could see a place and a space where future normalization agreements are discussed and tackled as well. But I think shoring up support for Israel, ensuring that we're not isolated by America, finding a common timeline for the end of this war, whether one agrees with doing so or not, that's probably where this is going. So, folks, whenever there is a targeted assassination that is brought about, there's obviously the risk that it will not meet with total success. That's to be appreciated by everybody and anybody who follows these issues and these matters. Obviously, a desired outcome would be for the elimination of Hamas's leadership in Doha by way of the strike that was carried out. With all of that having been said, I think that the Prime Minister was very clear very early on in the aftermath of October 7th, and he expressed as much publicly and repeatedly that wherever the Hamas leadership are, both inside the Gaza Strip and beyond the Gaza Strip, there is a target on their backs. The Prime Minister expressed that. He stated it time and again. And I actually think that it's very appropriate that the Prime Minister, whomever it may be, continues to take the fight and continues to attempt to eliminate these terror masters, including Hamas leadership inside Doha. You know, our former Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, when he launched the daring and legendary raid against the terrorists who were holding Israeli hostages in Entebbe, he was asked, why did you, Prime Minister, decide to launch this raid? And he was asked that because the presumption was he must have known that launching the raid would bring about an end to the negotiations for the hostages to be released that were taking place at exactly the same time. And Prime Minister Rabin said, you have to fight terror as though there are no negotiations, and you have to negotiate as though there is no terror. And I think that that is absolutely correct. I think that is the ethos that we saw Prime Minister Netanyahu carry out on this occasion. And though it wasn't successful this time, it sent a very, very clear, strong, and discombobulating message to the leaders of Hamas that they are not safe anywhere. They never will be safe, and that they will be pursued to the ends of the earth. Rightly so, after what they did to us on October the 7th. People forget about October the 7th. I don't. You shouldn't. And the Israeli people certainly have not either.